Wilted flower, I know science, philosophy, and art, my lord. He mocked her. She destroyed his pride. The kingdom of Erendor stretched across hills and forests, rivers and stone castles, where the wind carried whispers of forgotten kings and long-lost secrets. Its people often spoke of magic that lingered in the air, unseen but felt, especially in the high castle where Lord Alaric ruled with sharp intellect and sharper pride. His mind was his weapon, and his pride a shield. He had never met an equal, and the thought of one had never crossed his mind, until the day Lady Selene arrived. Selene's carriage rolled through the castle gates, drawn by horses as dark as midnight. Her cloak shimmered faintly under the afternoon sun, embroidered with patterns of stars and spirals that seemed to move if one stared too long. She carried herself with quiet confidence, yet the guards whispered as she passed, sensing something unusual in her presence. Not a mere scholar, they said, but someone who carried the weight of unseen worlds in her eyes. When she was presented to Alaric, the Lord's gaze fell upon her like a challenge. He was tall, his posture perfect, and his eyes sharp, the color of storm clouds before a lightning strike. "You claim knowledge of the arts and sciences, philosophy, and the unseen," he said, voice dripping with skepticism. "But what can a woman of gentle birth teach a ruler of Erendor?" Selene's lips curved slightly, a smile that did not bend her pride. "Perhaps more than a ruler expects, my lord," she replied, her voice even and calm. It was not arrogance but certainty, and it struck him with an unfamiliar feeling, curiosity tangled with annoyance. The courtiers around them shifted uneasily. Many had seen Alaric's pride crush even the boldest minds, yet Selene spoke with a confidence that seemed immune. She moved through her explanations like a painter brushing the canvas of truth. She spoke of the stars, of the unseen laws that govern nature, of art and music that held secrets of human understanding. And then carefully she revealed subtle truths about Alaric himself, his fear of being ordinary, his hunger for admiration, and the blind spots he had never noticed. Alaric's pride flared, yet he could not dismiss her words. Each sentence was a mirror, reflecting back what he had hidden even from himself. He found his fingers clenching the armrests of his throne, not in anger, but in the strange stirrings of fascination and unease. "You speak boldly," he said, his tone a mixture of mockery and challenge. "Do you think knowledge alone is enough to survive in a kingdom filled with intrigue, ambition, and the shadows that dwell between men's hearts?" Selene's eyes met his, unwavering. "Knowledge alone is nothing, my lord, but combined with courage and understanding, it can illuminate even the darkest paths." Alaric laughed lightly, but it held no joy. "And what if understanding reveals truths too dangerous to face?" "Then it is better to face them than live blinded by pride," she said, stepping closer, her gaze unwavering. Even the courtiers felt the intensity in the air. Alaric, never accustomed to feeling exposed in the presence of another, especially a woman, tried to regain control of the situation. He summoned a servant to bring wine, hoping to regain his composure and dignity. Selene, however, remained standing, her posture calm and unyielding, as though the castle itself bent subtly to her presence. That night, Alaric's dreams were restless. The shadows in his chambers twisted into forms he did not recognize, faces of those who had been wronged, echoes of decisions he had made, and a strange, whispering voice that seemed to call out to him in riddles. "You cannot hide from what comes," it murmured. In the midst of the shadows, he saw her figure, standing serene yet radiant, as if she carried the moonlight in her hands. The next morning, Alaric found himself summoned to the council hall. Selene was already there, speaking quietly with advisors who had never before dared challenge him. She revealed solutions to problems that had plagued the kingdom for decades, routes through treacherous lands, treaties with neighboring realms, even ways to prevent starvation in distant villages. Each suggestion was simple yet brilliant, practical yet inspired. Alaric felt the sting of humiliation deep within. He, who prided himself on knowledge and strategy, realized he had underestimated her. And yet, a strange warmth, one he did not understand, began to grow inside him. He had never met someone who could dismantle his pride so completely while remaining untouched by it herself. Reluctantly, he invited her to stay at the castle as his advisor, though he framed it as a cautious experiment. "We shall see if your talents are genuine, Lady Selene," he said, his voice formal, but beneath it lay the first flicker of respect. "Erindor is not a kingdom for the timid." Selene inclined her head, the faintest glimmer of triumph in her eyes. "Nor for those who fear truth," she replied. The castle, however, was not at peace. In the outskirts, where the forests thickened and the wind sang through gnarled branches, shadows stirred. A dark curse, ancient and patient, had lain dormant for centuries, feeding on ambition, greed, and pride. It sensed the arrival of Selene, and it stirred with unease. The curse had waited for someone who could both challenge and temper the arrogance of men, and it now watched Alaric and Selene with growing curiosity. That evening, the castle gardens glowed under the silver of a full moon. Selene wandered among the marble statues and twisting vines, her thoughts occupied with the whispers she had begun to notice, soft, almost inaudible, seeming to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The air carried a subtle chill, though the night was warm. She paused before a fountain, water shimmering in moonlight, and felt it, a presence, quiet but probing, like eyes watching her soul. Alaric, troubled by the day's events and his unexpected feelings, found himself walking through the same garden. He saw her standing there, still and luminous, and for a moment he forgot all else, his crown, his castle, his pride. He took a cautious step forward. "You seem unafraid," he said quietly. Selene turned to him, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and caution. "Fear is only useful when it teaches. Otherwise, it is a chain." Alaric hesitated. He had never met anyone who spoke so boldly, who did not bow before him or tremble at his power, and yet he felt both drawn to her and unsettled. "You speak as if you understand everything," he said, almost a whisper. "Even me," she met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "I understand what people show. The rest, time will reveal." The garden was silent, save for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Alaric sensed a weight in her words, a truth he could not yet name. And in that silence, the shadows of the curse stirred, curling like smoke around the edges of the garden. A whisper reached Selene's ears, soft and unintelligible, a warning that this castle, this kingdom, and even this man were not as they seemed. The night deepened. The moon dipped behind clouds, and the garden seemed to hold its breath. Selene turned back toward the castle, but before she reached the gates, she felt the whisper again. A voice almost like a sigh carried on the wind, warning her that her arrival had set forces in motion that could not be undone. Alaric watched her walk away, a strange unease gnawing at him. Pride, he realized, was a fragile thing, and Selene had already begun to dismantle it piece by piece. And somewhere in the darkness, he sensed that the challenges she brought were only beginning, and that neither of them were truly safe until the shadows of Erindor revealed their secrets. As the castle slept, a single candle flickered in Selene's chambers. She sat at her desk, quill in hand, recording observations that could alter the fate of the kingdom. Her eyes flicked to the window, toward the forests where the darkness whispered. She felt the weight of unseen eyes, of ancient forces waking, and for the first time, she wondered if she had truly come to Erindor by choice, or if destiny itself had drawn her to a place where pride, knowledge, and courage would collide. And in that moment, the castle seemed to exhale, as if aware that a new chapter had begun, a chapter that would test intellect, pride, and hearts in ways neither Selene nor Alaric could yet imagine. Hook cliffhanger. As Selene placed her quill down, the shadows outside the window thickened unnaturally, and a cold whisper carried through the room. "The mind has arrived, But the heart is not ready. The morning sun spilled gold across the towers of Urindor, yet the castle felt heavier than usual, as though shadows clung stubbornly to its stone walls. In the grand hall, Lady Selene moved with quiet grace, her presence commanding attention without a single word. Courtiers whispered among themselves, their voices low, for they had begun to see the stirrings of change in their lord's demeanor. Lord Alaric stood at the head of the hall, tall and imposing, yet attention lay beneath his carefully held composure. Since Selene's arrival, he felt a strange unease. His pride, once unassailable, had been chipped by her insight and wit. Each discussion with her revealed new truths about himself, truths he had spent years hiding from even his own reflection. And yet, beneath his annoyance, a deeper feeling stirred, a fascination, difficult to admit, that tugged at his mind and heart alike. Today, they would engage in what the court would later call their first duel, a private contest of intellect, strategy, and perception. It was Alaric's idea, a challenge born of both curiosity and the need to test her skill. He wanted to know if her wisdom was genuine or simply elegant words designed to flatter. The chamber doors closed behind the few invited courtiers, and Alaric's gaze met Selene's. "Lady Selene," he began, voice smooth but carrying an edge, "we will test knowledge today. Not merely of books, but of thought, insight, and vision. You may answer as you wish, but remember, the mind can reveal as much as it can conceal." Selene inclined her head. "And you, my lord, will find that the mind is a mirror of truth, whether one is ready to see it or not." The duel began simply, with riddles of nature, logic, and celestial patterns. Selene's answers were precise, elegant, and sometimes poetic, carrying subtle lessons that revealed layers of understanding beyond the immediate question. Alaric, skilled in debate, countered with logic and artful reasoning, yet he found himself continually surprised. For every trap he laid, she anticipated it, turning his challenge into a lesson rather than a confrontation. Hours passed, yet neither yielded ground. The courtiers watched in awe, sensing something extraordinary unfolding before them. It was not a simple contest. It was a dance of intellect, each movement charged with tension, each word a spark in the quiet storm between them. During a particularly intense exchange, Alaric posed a question designed to unsettle her. If knowledge leads to power, and power corrupts, which is the greater danger, the mind that rules wisely or the heart that follows blindly? Selene paused, her eyes reflecting both thought and subtle defiance. "The mind alone can strategize," she said softly, "but it is the heart that decides whether wisdom serves good or ill. Without courage to act, intellect is merely a cage of potential." Alaric felt a shiver down his spine. Her words were simple, yet they struck at the core of his own insecurities. For years, he had relied on intellect to maintain control, using logic to shield his fears and pride. And now, her insight illuminated the weaknesses he had long denied. In the garden outside the chamber, the curse that had been dormant since her arrival grew restless. Its presence stirred in the wind, twisting leaves and bending shadows unnaturally. It fed on the tension between them, sensing the emotional and mental turmoil in both the lord and the lady. Though neither spoke of it, both felt a weight pressing against the edges of consciousness, an awareness of unseen forces testing them. Selene's eyes caught a subtle movement in the corner of the hall, a shadow that did not belong. She did not startle, but she made a mental note, aware that the curse was active and watching. She had felt its presence once before, in the moonlit garden, and now its influence had grown stronger, feeding on Alaric's pride and curiosity. Alaric, despite himself, began to admire her, not merely for her intellect, but for her composure, her bravery, and the calm confidence that did not bow to fear or flattery. He noticed the subtle sway of her expression, the way her eyes held unwavering focus even in the midst of debate, and the small moments where her lips curved in quiet triumph. For the first time, he realized that his fascination was more than respect. It was a tension of desire, restraint, and rivalry all at once. The duel intensified when Alaric presented a puzzle designed to test intuition rather than logic. It involved a map of the kingdom with secret paths, a riddle of rivers and mountains, and the fate of hidden villages. Selene listened quietly, her mind weaving connections faster than his imagination could follow. She solved it, but she added a subtle correction, one that would save lives he had not considered. The courtiers gasped. Even Alaric's closest advisors felt the impact. Alaric's jaw tightened, pride and admiration warred within him. He had intended to expose her limits, yet she had not only answered the challenge but revealed truths he had overlooked. As the afternoon waned, Selene and Alaric moved to discuss philosophy and art. She spoke of the nature of beauty, of the delicate balance between creation and destruction, of the lessons history whispered to those who would listen. Each word seemed to resonate, striking chords within Alaric's mind that had long been silent. "Knowledge without reflection is like a sword without a hand," she said. "It can wound or it can protect, but only the one who understands the heart behind the blade can choose its true purpose." Alaric felt the weight of her words as though they had been carved into his very being. Pride had guided him for so long, yet here was a woman who spoke not to humiliate, but to awaken. He wanted to resist, yet he found himself leaning in, mentally and emotionally, drawn to her insight. Outside the chamber, the curse twisted the shadows into strange, almost human forms. It murmured, testing boundaries, seeking to exploit their growing connection. It whispered doubts into Alaric's mind, stoking fear and suspicion. Do you trust her too easily? Can knowledge be weaponized against you? Selene, sensing the shift in the air, turned her awareness outward. She did not fear the shadow, but she knew it watched, waiting for weakness. Her calm focus and unwavering courage were her defense, and she met Alaric's glance with quiet reassurance, signaling without words that they would face what came together. As evening approached, Alaric reluctantly admitted that the duel had reached its temporary conclusion. Neither had been defeated, yet the balance had shifted. Alaric's pride, once impenetrable, had been challenged. His curiosity, once academic, had become personal. And in the quiet corners of his mind, he felt the stirrings of something he could neither name nor control. "Your insight is remarkable," he said finally, his voice quieter than usual, stripped of mockery but tinged with vulnerability. "I underestimated you, Lady Selene." She inclined her head, but her eyes held no triumph. "You were not meant to underestimate, my lord. And pride is a fragile thing. It reveals both weakness and strength, depending on how it is faced." Alaric felt a flicker of unease at the truth in her words. The curse outside seemed to sense it too, feeding on his vulnerability, coiling like smoke around the castle walls. And yet, for the first time, he felt that pride alone could not protect him. That night, Alaric wandered the corridors of the castle, unable to find sleep. Selene's words echoed in his mind, and with them, the whisper of the shadows that had begun to stir long before her arrival. The castle felt alive, watching, waiting. And though he tried to dismiss it as imagination, he could not shake the feeling that unseen eyes followed every step, that unseen forces tested not only his intellect but the strength of his heart. Meanwhile, Selene sat in her chambers, quill in hand, recording thoughts and observations about the duel. Her mind was alive with strategies and reflections, but she could not ignore the presence that had whispered to her since her arrival, the curse, ancient and patient, probing boundaries. She understood its hunger for pride and conflict, and she knew that it would not rest until it found a weakness, in her or in Alaric. The castle was quiet, yet the night was thick with tension. Outside, the shadows danced unnaturally, almost as if anticipating the next stage of the contest between Selene and Alaric. The wind carried a soft murmur, a reminder that knowledge alone would not be enough. Courage, trust, and the strength to face the unknown would be tested, in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Alaric's restlessness drew him to the castle gardens once more. The moonlight bathed the paths in silver, and he saw her silhouette among the roses and ivy. She turned as he approached, her expression calm yet alert. "You are still here," he said, voice low. "Do you sense it too?" Selene nodded slightly. "The shadows are restless. They watch and wait, testing our limits, but fear will not guide us. Knowledge and courage will." Alaric studied her for a long moment. For the first time, he saw her not as a rival, but as an ally, someone whose strength and mind could face what he could not alone. And though pride still whispered doubts in his heart, a seed of trust had begun to take root. Hook cliffhanger. A sudden rustling came from the deeper gardens where no wind stirred. Shadows thickened unnaturally, coiling around the twisted trees. Selene's eyes widened slightly, and Alaric felt a chill run down his spine. From the darkness, a whisper rose. "The duel has begun, but the true battle is only starting." The castle of Erendor had grown quieter in the days following the duel of minds. Courtiers whispered in hushed tones, some in admiration, some in fear. They sensed a shift in the air, an invisible tension that wound through the corridors, through the tapestries, and through the stone walls themselves. Alaric's pride, once untouchable, had begun to crumble, revealing a vulnerability he had never known. Selene, ever composed, moved through the halls with her usual grace, aware that the shadow lurking over the kingdom had grown stronger, waiting for the right moment to strike. Alaric, despite his pride, found himself seeking her counsel more often. It was no longer a matter of test or challenge. He genuinely wished to understand her insights, though he struggled to admit it even to himself. Every conversation revealed more of his hidden fears and ambitions, and every glance he shared with Selene carried an unspoken tension that neither dared name. One evening, the two of them stood in the library, surrounded by towering shelves filled with tomes of knowledge, some centuries old. The firelight danced across the walls, casting long, flickering shadows. Selene held a book of forgotten philosophy in her hands, and Alaric watched her as she spoke, the words flowing with calm authority. "You have a way of seeing beyond what is spoken," Alaric said, his voice softer than usual. "It unnerves me, and I do not know if I should resent it or admire it." Selene did not look up immediately. She traced a finger along a passage in the book. "To observe is not to judge, my lord. To understand is not to conquer." Knowledge can illuminate the truth, but it also exposes what we wish to hide from ourselves. Alaric swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words more than the wisdom they contained. He had spent years hiding behind intellect, pride, and authority, and now she had stripped him bare with her insight. It was both terrifying and intoxicating. The curse, sensing his vulnerability, stirred with renewed strength. In the corners of the library, shadows lengthened unnaturally, curling and twisting as if alive. A chill ran down Alaric's spine, and he realized the danger was no longer distant. It was near, testing them both. Selene, reading his reaction, did not panic. Instead, she closed the book slowly, her calm presence a beacon in the encroaching darkness. "The curse knows pride," she said softly. "It feeds on it, but courage can guide us through the shadows." Alaric nodded, though he did not speak. He felt a strange connection between them now, forged not only by mutual respect but by the trials they had faced together. And yet, the deeper he felt that bond, the more he feared the curse that lurked, waiting to exploit their hearts and minds. The next day, a summons arrived from the council. The ancient archives of Erendor had been disturbed, books moved, scrolls scattered, and cryptic symbols appearing where none had been before. Alaric and Selene were called to investigate. The castle corridors seemed narrower, darker, as if the shadows themselves were pressing against the stone walls. Selene moved forward with deliberate steps, her eyes scanning every corner, every flicker of movement. "This is the work of the curse," she whispered. "It tests us, probes us, and seeks to weaken the resolve of those who face it." Alaric followed, his hand brushing against the hilt of his sword. Though he relied on knowledge and strategy, he felt instinctively that intellect alone would not be enough this time. There was something alive in the darkness, something patient, intelligent, and dangerous. In the heart of the archives, they found the source, a black mist that moved with purpose, curling around the shelves and forming shapes that mimicked their movements. The air was thick and cold, carrying whispers that seemed to speak directly to their minds. "You cannot conquer what you do not understand. Your pride will be your undoing." Selene stepped forward unafraid. "It is not our pride that will save us," she said firmly. "It is our willingness to act together, to trust knowledge and courage in equal measure." Alaric's pride bristled at her calm confidence, yet he felt a strange relief in her words. For the first time, he did not feel the need to dominate or prove himself. Instead, he felt a fragile sense of partnership, a bond forged in the fires of intellect and tested in the presence of darkness. The black mist shifted suddenly, forming a figure that resembled Alaric himself, though twisted and shadowed, mocking his every expression. Alaric's heart pounded. He realized that the curse sought not only to frighten them but to exploit their deepest insecurities. "You face yourself," Selene said, her voice steady. "Not just your pride, but your fear, your desire for control, and your doubt. Face it with clarity and the shadows lose power." Alaric stepped forward, his mind racing. He remembered Selene's teachings, the balance of intellect and courage, the need to act with understanding, the strength that comes from humility. Taking a deep breath, he confronted the shadow, acknowledging its presence without fear. Slowly, the figure dissolved into mist, retreating into the corners of the room. Selene approached him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "You are stronger than you know," she said. "But strength alone is not enough. Wisdom must guide it and the heart must follow." Alaric's gaze softened, and for a brief moment the tension between them shifted from rivalry to connection. He realized that her words were not merely lessons. They were a bridge between them, a chance for understanding and perhaps something deeper. But the relief was short-lived. From the shadows beyond the archives, a voice whispered with cold authority, a warning of trials yet to come. "The mind can conquer illusions. The heart can conquer fear, but only together can you face what is coming." Selene felt a chill, the kind that spoke of ancient power and inevitable destiny. She turned to Alaric. "The curse is not finished. This was only a test, one of many, and it will not relent until it finds a weakness." Alaric nodded, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. For the first time, he understood that Selene's arrival had not been by chance. She had come to challenge him, to reveal truths he could not see alone, and to prepare him for trials that would demand more than intellect or courage. It would demand trust, unity, and the willingness to face the unknown together. That night, the castle was alive with whispers. Shadows moved along the walls, curling like smoke, and the moonlight cast shapes that seemed almost sentient. Alaric stood by the balcony, looking out at the forests below, where darkness twisted and shimmered unnaturally. Selene joined him silently, her presence steady, offering quiet reassurance. "You are thinking too much," she said softly, her voice carrying over the night wind. "The mind seeks answers in all directions, but the heart knows the path when it is willing to follow." Alaric looked at her, the moonlight illuminating the determination in her eyes. He felt the stirrings of emotions he could not yet name, admiration, respect, and a longing that made his chest tighten. Pride whispered caution, yet a deeper instinct urged him to trust her. "Do you think we can truly face it?" he asked, nodding toward the forests where shadows moved like living things. Selene's eyes glimmered with certainty. "We must, and we will, but it will not be easy. The curse knows the weaknesses of the mind and heart alike. It will push us, tempt us, and test us in ways we cannot yet imagine." A sudden movement in the shadows made them both turn. For an instant, the darkness coalesced into a shape, a figure tall and indistinct, yet human in form. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only the chill and the sense of being watched. Alaric's hand brushed against Seleni's, almost instinctively. Neither spoke, yet the gesture carried a silent agreement. They would face what came together, as equals bound by intellect, courage, and the beginnings of a bond that neither could yet name. As the night deepened, Selene returned to her chambers, her mind racing with thoughts of strategy, philosophy, and the growing darkness. Alaric lingered on the balcony, staring at the twisting shadows, aware that the real trial was only beginning. The duel of minds had revealed much, but the curse had only just begun to test their hearts. The castle exhaled in silence, and from the edge of the forest a voice rose, echoing in the still night. The mind has shown its strength, but the heart must now be proven. Only then can the shadows be truly faced. And in that whisper, both Selene and Alaric understood the truth. The trials ahead would demand not only intellect and courage, but the strength to trust each other, and perhaps in that trust, find something neither had anticipated. Hook cliffhanger. From the edge of the balcony, Alaric glimpsed a figure cloaked in shadow, moving toward the castle walls. Its presence was deliberate, purposeful, and alive. Selene's voice came softly behind him. It begins. And this time, we may not face it alone. The morning light broke over Erendor like a promise, but the castle felt heavy with anticipation. Shadows still lingered in the corners of the corridors, and a cold wind whispered through the halls as if carrying secrets from the forest beyond. Lady Selene stood in the great hall, her eyes steady and calm, though her mind raced with strategies and possibilities. She had studied the curse since her arrival, learned its patterns and sensed its hunger for pride and conflict. Today, she knew, it would test them fully. Lord Alaric approached her quietly, his expression a mix of determination and something softer, more vulnerable. He had grown during their time together, his pride tempered by respect for Selene, his intellect sharpened not by rivalry, but by partnership. Yet he felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him now, heavier than any debate, heavier than any challenge the curse could throw at them. "The darkness waits," Selene said, her voice quiet but strong. "It knows fear and hesitation. We cannot falter." Alaric nodded, his hand brushing hers in a gesture of unspoken unity. "Then we face it together," he said, the words simple but filled with a new kind of strength. For the first time, he did not feel the need to dominate or control. He felt the need to trust. The castle gates opened to the forests beyond, where the shadows coiled like living things. The air was thick, almost tangible, charged with ancient power. Every step they took felt heavier, as if the ground itself resisted them. Yet Selene moved with grace, a beacon of calm in the encroaching darkness, and Alaric followed, his courage steadied by her presence. As they reached the heart of the forest, the shadows gathered fully, forming shapes that twisted and writhed with purpose. The curse revealed itself, a figure cloaked in darkness, its face a shifting mask of fear, desire, and ambition. It spoke with a voice that echoed in their minds. "You have challenged pride, you have tested knowledge, but the heart is unproven." Selene stepped forward, her gaze steady. "We are ready," she said, "not alone but together, and that is stronger than any darkness you can conjure." Alaric felt his pulse quicken. The figure in the shadows mirrored his own form, but every feature was exaggerated. His pride, his doubts, his need for control. It lunged forward, testing him, and he met it not with anger but with awareness. He saw the weakness in himself, acknowledged it, and faced it with courage. The shadow faltered. Selene moved alongside him, her presence unwavering. She raised her hands, and the knowledge she had gathered, the wisdom of science, philosophy, and art, shone through her words, her calm authority, and her actions. She spoke to the curse not as an enemy but as a force to be understood. You may test, you may tempt, but unity and courage cannot be broken. The shadows recoiled, hissing like wind through dead leaves. Alaric stepped closer to Selene, their hands brushing, and he felt a surge of clarity. Pride had been the curse's weapon, but trust, humility, and the bond between them were its undoing. Together, they became stronger than fear itself. The dark figure twisted one last time, forming the shape of Alaric alone, staring at him with mockery and accusation. "You cannot conquer yourself," it whispered, "nor can you protect her." Alaric took a deep breath and spoke aloud, not as a lord to his subject, but as a partner to an equal. "I do not seek to conquer her, nor to hide from myself. I face both, and together we are stronger than your shadow." The figure faltered, shattering into mist that dissolved into the night air. The shadows in the forest dissipated like smoke caught in sunlight, and the wind stilled. Alaric and Selene stood side by side, their breaths mingling in the quiet after the storm. The curse had been defeated, not by power alone, not by intellect alone, but by the union of courage, knowledge, and trust. For a moment, neither spoke. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the birds returning to the trees, and the sunlight filtering through the branches touched their faces with warmth. Alaric turned to Selene, his expression softened by relief, admiration, and something deeper he had never allowed himself to name. "You," he began, struggling to find words. "You have changed everything, Selene. Not just the kingdom, but me." Selene's eyes glimmered, reflecting both pride in their victory and a quiet affection. "We changed it together," she said. "And you faced what you could not alone. That is what matters." Alaric smiled, a smile that was more genuine than any he had offered before. He reached for her hand fully, holding it with respect and warmth. Then perhaps pride was never meant to rule. Perhaps it was meant to be tempered by wisdom and by heart. Selene nodded, a small, serene smile touching her lips. "And perhaps knowledge alone is incomplete without courage and trust. We have both learned this, my lord." Together, they returned to the castle, the forest behind them now bathed in golden sunlight. The courtiers watched in awe as they entered the hall, not as lord and advisor, but as equals, united by trials that had tested their minds, hearts, and spirits. The whispers of admiration were tinged with wonder. The curse had been undone, and the two who faced it had emerged transformed. In the days that followed, Erendor began to heal. Shadows that had haunted the castle receded, long-forgotten threats faded, and the people sensed a new era dawning, an era guided not by fear or arrogance, but by unity, courage, and wisdom. Selene's influence reshaped the council, teaching lessons of balance and foresight, while Alaric's leadership became tempered by humility and respect. Together, they forged plans for the kingdom that combined intellect and heart, strategy and compassion. Yet the transformation was not only in the kingdom. Alaric felt a change within himself, a release from the weight of pride that had long defined him. He could face the unknown without fear, and he could embrace his feelings for Selene without shame. And Selene, who had arrived as a scholar and stranger, found herself deeply connected to him, not only as an equal in intellect, but as a companion of heart and spirit. One evening, as the sun set over the towers, casting the halls in gold and crimson, Alaric and Selene walked together on the balcony. The wind carried the scent of the forest, now peaceful and free from the curse's shadow. Alaric stopped, turning to face her fully. "Selene," he said softly, "I cannot imagine facing what came alone, nor can I imagine the future without you by my side." Selene looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and vulnerability he had revealed over the past weeks. She reached out, taking both his hands in hers. "And I cannot imagine facing what is to come without you. We have faced darkness, pride, and fear together. That is the bond that matters, my lord." Alaric's lips curved into a smile, the weight of old pride lifted, replaced by something richer and enduring. Then we face it as equals, not as lord and subject, not as teacher and student, but as companions, as partners in all things. Seleni's smile met his, soft and unwavering. Yes, together we are stronger than any shadow. The castle seemed to breathe in harmony with them, the walls no longer heavy with tension but alive with light and possibility. In that moment, the trials, the duels, and the darkness faded into memory, leaving only clarity, trust, and the beginnings of a deep, unspoken love. And yet they knew the world beyond the castle was vast, full of challenges and unknown forces. But they also knew that whatever came, they would face it together, their minds sharpened, their hearts aligned, and their courage united. As night fell, the stars above Erendor sparkled more brightly than ever, as if celebrating the triumph of intellect, courage, and heart over shadow and fear. Selene and Alaric stood side by side on the highest balcony, gazing at the horizon, feeling the promise of a future shaped not by pride, but by partnership. Final whisper of fate. In the quiet of the night, a faint shimmer of shadow appeared on the edge of the horizon, not threatening but observing. It seemed to whisper one final truth. The darkness tests all, but together, the light endures. And for the first time, Alaric and Selene understood fully. The curse had been only the beginning of a story much larger than themselves. But with minds united, hearts aligned, and courage undaunted, they could face whatever came next. Hand in hand, they turned toward the castle, the warmth of the hearth and the promise of the future welcoming them home.